Breaking news for Raider Nation. Tomorrow marks a huge moment for Las Vegas. The Raiders step onto the field for their final preseason showdown, and while the big-name stars won't suit up, the fight for roster spots is about to get intense. Some players are battling for their careers, and what happens tomorrow could decide their future in silver and black. Stay locked in, because this story has major twists you don't want to miss. Raider fans, get ready. Tomorrow is the last preseason game, and while the starters will rest, the real drama is happening behind the scenes. This game is all about the fighters, the grinders, the guys trying to prove they belong on this roster. We're talking about players like Darren Porter, who's desperate to make an impression, and Yokorian Bennett and Q Blue Kelly, who are both pushing through injuries but could still suit up. These aren't household names yet, but tomorrow could change everything for them. Of course, big stars like Max Crosby, Tyree Wilson, and Malcolm Koonce won't take the field, but don't think this game is meaningless. For the men on the bubble, this is their Super Bowl. One mistake could cost them a roster spot. One big play could save their career. But before we dive deeper into these roster battles, make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and smash the bell icon. That way you'll always be the first to know when fresh Raiders news breaks right here. Now let's talk about what's really heating up, the running back battle. Behind Ashton Jeanty, the competition for the RB2 spot is wide open, and right now, it's not looking too strong. Just last week against the 49ers, Raheem Mort was still getting carries late into the third quarter. That's not a good sign if you're fighting for a major role. When I saw Raheem Mort still on the field deep into the third quarter, it raised a red flag. If he's supposed to be the Raiders' RB2, then why is he grinding it out against backups? That tells me one thing. This running back room lacks real depth. Compare that to other teams. Look at Miami. They're stacked. Devin Achane is already a top talent. Jalen Wright brings blazing speed. And they just drafted Ollie Garden too, another explosive runner. Even the Eagles loaded up, adding Saquon Barkley, Will Shipley, and A.J. Dillon. Those teams have options, weapons, insurance plans. The Raiders, behind Ashton Jeanty, it gets shaky fast. Zamir White hasn't shown he can be trusted. If Jeanty missed just a few drives, would Raider Nation feel confident handing the ball to him? I wouldn't. There are a few wild cards, though. Sincere McCormick has barely been used, only 4 touches so far. Hard to say if the coaches even trust him. On the other hand, Chris Collier and Dylan Lobb have flashed. Collier's averaging over 5 yards a carry on 13 attempts, while Lobb is at 5.6 on 7 carries. Those numbers look good on paper, but here's the catch. Preseason can be deceiving. Running against third and fourth string defenses makes anyone look better than they really are. That's why tomorrow's game is so critical. Someone needs to step up and prove they can be the real RB2, because right now the Raiders don't have a clear answer. The Raiders need answers at running back, and tomorrow is the last chance to find them. Zamir White only saw 3 carries in the last game, far too little to judge whether he can truly be the RB2. Right now, the depth chart has White and Raheem Mort locked in a battle for that role. But let's be honest, neither of them has proven they can be trusted as the clear backup behind Ashton Jeanty. If that's the best the Raiders have, then next year's draft absolutely has to bring in new talent at the position. But the running back battle isn't the only story. The defensive tackle spot is also heating up. J.J. Pegas turned heads last week, putting together multiple winning snaps and showing real power inside. That was a big step forward because in the first preseason game, he barely stood out. Instead, it was Tonka Hemingway who stole the spotlight against Seattle, even earning talk of taking first-team reps. Pegas has to prove his breakout wasn't a fluke. Against the Cardinals, this is his chance to show consistency and lock down a roster spot. If he fades, he risks being cut and shuffled onto the practice squad, the same fate that fell on past hopefuls like Nesta Jade Silvera. The reality is simple. The Raiders have a crowded defensive tackle room, and not everyone will survive the final cuts. For Pegas, this game could decide whether he wears silver and black on Sundays or whether his journey continues elsewhere. Tomorrow is going to tell us a lot about the Raiders' defensive line rotation. Some players are locked in, guys like Adam Butler, Jonah Lalu, Tonka Hemingway, and Zach Carter are almost certain to make the roster. But behind them, the competition is wide open, and this game could determine who survives. One player I'll be watching closely is Thomas Booker. He has the size and potential, but he hasn't put it all together. Too often he's out of position in his run fits, and that's a problem. In the NFL, missing assignments in the trenches can cost you big plays. This is the moment for Booker to flash, whether it's as a run defender or as a pass rusher. If he doesn't, his future in silver and black could be in jeopardy. Then there's J.J. Pegas, who impressed last week but still needs to prove consistency. And don't forget about Tank Booker, another body fighting for the final spots on the defensive front. The question is simple. How many defensive tackles will the Raiders actually keep? The edge group is another area to watch. Jafari Harvey, number 91, made some noise earlier in camp, but hasn't carried that over into games yet. Against the 49ers, it was tough to evaluate him, too many bootlegs and misdirection plays that went away from his side. But now he has to make his presence felt. Same goes for Jaquan Joyner. These young edge rushers need to show they can set the edge, handle the run, and still create pressure when it matters. And here's where it gets really interesting. We're not just talking about backups anymore. Raiders recently signed Terrell Edmunds, and he's already running with the first team. That tells you the coaching staff is still searching for reliable starters, not just depth pieces. Tomorrow's snaps could go a long way in shaping who lines up as part of the starting defense in Week 1. The Raiders' secondary is where things get really interesting. At safety, Terrell Edmunds has only been with the team for a short time, yet he's already pushing for a starting role. He may not overtake Isaiah Pola-Mao right away, but don't be surprised if both of them see extended snaps tomorrow, along with rookie Chris Smith too. Seeing how those three rotate, especially in the box, could tell us a lot about the Raiders' defensive plans heading into Week 1. But while Edmunds and Pola-Mao look safe, the depth behind them isn't guaranteed. Seventh-rounder Trey Taylor hasn't lived up to expectations, and his roster spot is in real danger. If he doesn't show something tomorrow, he could be one of the early cuts. At cornerback, the picture is just as cloudy. Eric Stokes is locked in as a starter, but the other spots remain open. Darian Porter and Q Blue Kelly are fighting for their place on the outside, while slot corners like Darnay Holmes and Greedy Vance are battling for inside reps. And then there's Cameron Richardson, who's quietly making his case. If the coaches are forced to choose between Richardson and Vance, Richardson may have the edge. These final preseason snaps will mean everything for the defensive backs on the bubble. For some, tomorrow will be the moment that saves their careers. For others, it could be their last time wearing the silver and black. The Raiders' cornerback room is already crowded, and the cuts are going to be tough. With 5 corners practically locked in, players like Greedy Vance, Sam Webb, Thomas Harper, and Darnay Holmes may be on the outside looking in. Even Q Blue Kelly has been tested in the slot recently, which shows the coaching staff is still experimenting with different combinations before making final decisions. Another name to watch is J.T. Woods. He's shown flashes, and some believe his progress played a role in the team moving on from Yakorian Bennett. Woods is quick, versatile, and capable of carving out a role, but he'll need another strong showing to solidify his spot. Now, shifting to the offense, the wide receiver battle is just as fascinating. We already know the top 3, Trey Tucker, Jacoby Myers, and Dontavon Wicks Jr. are locked in as starters. But after that, it gets tricky. Who takes the WR4, WR5, and possibly WR6 spots? Not long ago, the assumption was that the loser of the Jack Beck versus Dante Thornton Jr. battle would naturally slide in as the 4th receiver. But that may no longer be the case. Shedrick Jackson has been one of the biggest surprises of camp. In limited opportunities, he's put up 7 catches for 104 yards and a touchdown on just 31 routes. Compare that to Beck, who's had more chances but only 3 catches for 26 yards. Beck is still a rookie with plenty of time to develop, and the Raiders won't move on from him. But the numbers don't lie. Jackson is outperforming him right now. The question is whether the coaches reward production or stick with long-term potential. Either way, the decisions at wide receiver could shape how deep and dangerous this offense really looks in 2024. The Raiders are still searching for that next man up at wide receiver, and suddenly Shedrick Jackson is making a serious case. At first glance, he doesn't jump off the tape as a burner, but then you hear he clocked a 4.3440. Even if that number came from scouts and wasn't official combine timing, it's still blazing speed. And that changes how you see him. He can absolutely slide into the deep threat role, stretching defenses the way Trey Tucker does. That brings us back to the big question: who is really the Raiders' WR4? Right now, it doesn't look like Jack Beck is ready to claim that spot. Sure, he's a rookie and development takes time, but so far he hasn't separated himself. Running routes is one thing, getting open and making plays is another. Meanwhile, the coaching staff has already shown more trust in Dante Thornton, who's clearly ahead of Beck at this stage. Thornton's had some issues finishing plays, but the raw talent is obvious. Once he settles down and consistently hauls in passes, he'll be a dangerous weapon. Tomorrow's game could be huge for Beck. He'll get reps, and this is his chance to prove he's more than just another body on the field. The Raiders need playmakers, guys who can change drives and put points on the board. And don't forget, there's still a crowded room behind the top names. Colin Johnson, Alex Bachman, Philip Dorsett, Troquan Callaway, and Tommy Mellott are all fighting for a shot. Out of that group, Mellott feels like a long shot to make the 53-man roster. He could land on the practice squad, but cracking into the main lineup looks tough with so much competition. At the end of the day, it's simple. Preseason is about proving you belong. And right now, Jackson is showing more than Beck. If that continues, the Raiders might have a very different receiver rotation than anyone expected just a few weeks ago. When the Raiders drafted multiple wide receivers this year, it was clear the competition would be fierce. Now, with one last preseason game on deck, it's time to see who steps up and claims their spot. But it's not just about receivers, the offensive line is under the spotlight too. One name to watch is Alex Kappa. He's finally healthy and practicing again, and while it's unlikely he wins a starting job right away after missing so much camp, his role as depth could be huge. If injuries hit, and history says they usually do, Kappa could be the guy sliding in at guard when the Raiders need him most. Depth matters more than ever, especially inside. Over the last 3 years, the Raiders have lost at least one starter on the interior line every season. That's why having versatile backups who can step in at guard or center is critical. One young lineman who's really impressed is Caleb Rogers. He looked solid in his first preseason action, but against the 49ers he took another step forward. If he can stack another strong performance against Arizona, he might cement himself as one of the team's most promising backups. The Raiders also want to see more from Will Putnam and rookie Jared Hufford. These younger guys have shown flashes, and preseason reps are their chance to prove they belong. On the other hand, Thayer Munford hasn't shown much progress. Unless the team values his veteran presence, his roster spot could be in real danger. Even Dalton Wagner hasn't been convincing, though rookie Parker Clements has at least shown glimpses of potential. The truth is, beyond the starters, the Raiders don't have a tackle they can rely on with confidence right now. If either Colton Miller or DJ Glaze were to miss time, it would put the line in a tough spot. Players like Charles Grant still need more time to develop before they're ready for that responsibility. At the end of the day, the health of the offensive line could shape the entire season. If this group can stay intact, the offense has the pieces to compete. But if injuries pile up, things could get shaky fast. The final preseason game will be more than just a warm-up. It's the last audition for players fighting to prove they belong. After that, the Raiders get a short break before opening the season against the Patriots. That's when the real test begins.